morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 140 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I have my regular co-hosts, Ian Kummer from a suburb in Moscow. I've got Carlo Parcelli from Washington, D.C., and our special guest is Patrick Corbett from Vancouver, Canada. And so we have entitled today's episode, Can Trump End Biden's War? I put Biden's war in scare quotes. That was how Trump referred to it in his 60 Minutes interview on Sunday, trying to, blame Biden for everything and say that, he's got nothing to do with it. It's all Biden who's trying to end it. So I think that'll be our first topic of discussion. What are the chances that they can figure something out? And by figure something out, it just seems that figure something out means, accepting Russia's terms, because that's the only way there's going to be peace. But I'm going to pick on Ian. He is in Moscow. So he's probably in tight communication with Vladimir Putin. So what are the chances, Ian, that Witkoff, I guess Witkoff was talking to Putin for quite a while, either yesterday or the day before. Do you think they can come up with anything?
Well, so I posted about that to Substack yesterday. So the Russian positions are, the same as they were 3 years ago. The three big points being barring Ukraine from joining NATO, no foreign troops in the territory of Ukraine, and also barred from producing nuclear weapons. What I find interesting is no one's really talking too much about the denazification goal, which is a step back, but it's also consistent with what was with early on. I mean, even the tentative peace deal in Istanbul in March 2022 dropped denazification, right? So I think, which makes sense. I mean, it's very pragmatic. I mean, if Ukraine wants to, name everything after Stepan Bandera and, have their little Nazi parades and all that, and they're doing it in Ukraine, and it's something it doesn't hurt anybody. So it's the main thing is that so it's not so much an ideological thing. It's just keeping Ukraine. Which is potentially, and it actually is a very large threat, which is proven by the fact that it's not a one-sided war. Ukraine can hit back, right? They're geographically very advantageously located. There's a lot of targets close to Ukraine that they can hit, and the fact that they have a very large territory and a very large population, as long as they're getting that outside support, they can keep going and going and going, apparently, to some extent, indefinitely. So that's the Russian position, and it's not changed. What's interesting is that the American side of the room was so deep in this bubble. Like, I think it was a very cold start. And by cold start, I mean, excuse me. What I mean by cold start is that it was the American negotiators came in. What was it? Kellogg is one of them. Yeah. They came into the room with just no idea of what the Russians were. Like, I think they literally just did not even know what the Russians were going to say, which is, and I think that's indicative of what's going on in Washington. I mean, if you're the president, or if you're just a politician in Washington, and just like, hey, what is the Russian? I want to know the Russian position. What is the Russian perspective on things? Who are you going to ask? Well, there's some Ukrainian guys you can ask. There's these ex-Soviet people. I survived the Soviet Union and came to get a free life in America. There's those people. But there's really nobody you can get a straight answer from. And there are 3 million Russians and Russian descended people in the USA, but the ones who might at least be able to give a straight answer is like, what? Even if I'm sure there's Russians who don't even like Putin, don't even like United Russia, don't like the government at all, but they could give an accurate answer of what are they trying to do. But those people aren't near the seat of power. They're not near the flagpole. Those aren't the people being talked to. Yeah. So it's just Americans have a very distorted view of the world, and that makes negotiating with America very difficult because you really have to pierce all of it's like disinformation aimed at ourselves, like not even aimed at the American people, just aimed even at our own leaders. It's just like it's propaganda. I mean, propaganda is typically meant to deceive the enemy, but American propaganda is meant to deceive everybody, including ourselves. So it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get it right.
That's all the alternative analysts always make that complaint. There's no experts anymore conducting diplomacy. Diplomacy has basically died as a thing, in the United States, unlike the old days. And so all the Larry Johnson and Scott Ritter and all those guys, Chaz Freeman, they're always lamenting the fact that there's no real good diplomatic corps that knows what they're doing, because they've all been purged, for ideological purposes. And so they don't want, they don't care but so Trump seems to care. He seems to, be.
Well, it's not I'll stop you there because it's just not a new problem either. Like there's that book, The Ugly American. I don't remember when that book was published, 1960s, I think. Yes. And basically it started really with, I think America had a pretty competent diplomatic corps, a pretty competent States Department. But what happened was China happened. Mao won in China, which caught everybody by surprise, right? Everybody's expecting a white Chinese victory in the Civil War, and the opposites happened. And there was that blame game. It was the Who Lost China Wars. And they decided it's because there was this disloyalty. There was these commie lovers in the State Department. So there was this big purge. And it was tied, of course, to the McCarthy thing, because that was his first target, was the State Department. All of these thin-chested, commie, Jewish, liberal type guys who can't be trusted. He was going after them, and then he gutted it. And there was really that unfortunately took most of the brain power with it.
So it's been a while.
Yes.
A long-term problem.
We're talking 60 years or more. Yes. 70, 80 years almost. Yeah. 70 years since you've had anybody. I think Carlo, I muted Carlo because of the background noise. Let me unmute him. He wants to say something.
Yeah. It's interesting that Ian brought up Graham Greene's book. It is an excellent kind of balance between what's going on now and what's not. And one of the interesting things I think that the talking heads that we watch primarily are talking about is the lack of leadership, and what they mean by that is Trump is trying to get away on intuition. He has he has insight into everything and doesn't need to know the facts. Now he's gone in to Ukraine, and by extension, I imagine we'll talk about it, the Iran situation, and not knowing all the facts, he looks like a fool. Keith Kellogg had no guidance, obviously. He didn't know what he was doing. J.D. Vance, he's an embarrassment. So is the Secretary of Defense. They don't know what's going on. It's supposed to come from the top down. And just like with the tariffs, Trump's all over the place. He doesn't know where he wants to be. He had no idea that these situations were that complex and that nuance. He had no idea what he had to bring to the table to get a peace talk, to get a peace agreement with the Russians. In one day, one phone call, 1 hour. What fool would have believed that? And now he's hung up. I don't even know why he bothers anymore. Because frankly, he's not going to serve a third term. Um, and all he's going to have is what? He's not going to have his MAGA crowds anymore because he's not going to be in the spotlight. He's just going to be another, failed billionaire.
When I listen to the alternative analysts, because you don't want to waste your time with the mainstream establishment 24-hour news networks, but the alternative analysts, there's like a disagreement. Some of them think that the dysfunction results from two sides opposing each other. So you got the neocon side, which is like Rubio and Kellogg, Hegseth, and then you have the side that's more America first, for lack of a better term, which is Vance and the lady that's the national security advisor, Gabbard. So some people see it like that, like there's this divide, this clear divide, and that's resulting in a little bit of dysfunction. But then, like Scott Ritter thinks that there's just a lack of leadership and chaos, and everybody is just saying their own thing. But yeah, no, I mean, it seems that there's chaos, it's tumultuousness, it's dysfunction, and it's just not clear about where they're trying to go and how they're trying to get there. But definitely, I mean, what's clear is there's change taking place. And so all we can do is speculate about the nature of that change. But I would like to get Patrick. He's very quiet and just listening. Any thoughts about anything so far that we've discussed?
There's two reasons for that, two possibilities. One is I know, but I'm not saying. That's the Taoist thing. The other is I don't know, and that's what I have to cop to. I'm listening avidly to everybody else, and I think there's a lot of good points being made, and points that I would not have made. I think reaching back to into the memory hole as Ian did is very pertinent, and it's not just Trump who's not getting that advice. It's the whole system. But what I wonder, and I don't see anything, and I must admit I haven't gone even attempted to unravel it, is what on Trump writing all his what do you call them, the security memos and things like that. What's pushing him? Who is pressuring Trump to go this way or that? I mean, he does not seem to have a clear direction in his own mind. He's got lots of talking points that we can rely on. His heroic stance pointing at himself. But the thing is, I'm waiting to hear something that tells me, yeah, that's what's happening. But I do think there is, I do think there's a ruling class divide that Trump is somewhat reflective of, but I don't know. I don't know who the people would be, and I don't know if we would even know. I'm more of along the lines of that. There are people, the puppet masters, who have even the politicians dancing on their swing. So it's not apparent to me what's driving things right now. And also, the theme question for this week is, can Trump stop Biden's war? Maybe he can, maybe he can't. But what happens after that? I mean, is Russia going to put any faith in what the American promises in the peace talks would be?
Well, you said a lot there, Patrick, and with regards to who, is there a split within the ruling establishment? What are the factions backing Trump? What are the factions opposing Trump? I mean, yeah, this is total speculation on our parts, and we would like to know. But you know what? The people don't have an intelligence agency. The intelligence agency is of, by, and for the ruling establishment, and they can tap in on the phones, and they could know who's talking to who's giving the orders, but they're not going to tell us because they work for those people too, yeah, that's what I would like to know. What is, who is backing Trump? Who is really in opposition to Trump? And I think he's got a large, backing. And again, like the paradigm where Trump is the vehicle for substantial change that is very negative and very problematic for the world and the people. Like the establishment is happy to use Trump as the vehicle for change because he's going to take all the blame. And so I think, he doesn't have much opposition. I think he's instituting, he's doing things, for the ruling establishment, and they're happy to let him do it. And they're not really going to really oppose him. They're going to, give lip service to, oh, this is crazy, he's going to crash the markets. And then when he does crash the markets, they're going to be like, oh, Trump crashed the markets. And guess what? They're happy that the markets are crashed, and they're really happy Trump did it. And then they're going to also blame him for it at the same time. But, that's kind of a paradigm that I think is taking place here. What else did you say at the very end? You said something too that I should have written down and I could have referenced.
I just talk. I don't record my own.
Hey, Carlo's got his hand up. I'm going to unmute Carlo.
I don't think we should abandon the dichotomy between fantasy and reality, because Trump was living. Trump has always lived a kind of fantasy. I mean, he's a great businessman that has been in the bankruptcy court, 5 or 7 times. The whole thing's a hall of mirrors, and now he's in an arena where facts actually matter. I remember when that idiot Reagan said, "Facts are stupid things," and I thought, well, could be all over. What an idiot! And he was. Reagan was a tool of high finance. He was a puppet, and now we have the supreme puppet, a guy who wakes up every morning and believes in his own delusions, and brings them forth. How does that work? What if I did that? I'd be dead. I'd be dead now if I acted like Trump. I have to act based on the facts that exist around me, and so do you all. But Trump doesn't. He doesn't have to do that, and he hasn't done that for most of his life. And I think now he's faced with realities that first, he's lazy. It's way beyond his capability to either. He's an old man. I know what it means to be old and to lose your strength. But he's a lazy man. He doesn't want to put in the effort. Doesn't read. Doesn't absorb information. Doesn't even allow his advisors to finish. You have to. Sooner or later, that ship is going to hit the docks. It's going to crash. And I think we might see a lot of that going on right now. And whether we can handle 4 years of it, whether the U.S. can handle 4 years of it, is still to be seen. I think he's I think it's a mess. If it wasn't for this guy Pete Witkoff, who must be a hell of a real estate agent coming along, I don't think they've got anything. But the problem is, in either arena, either Iran or Ukraine, Witkoff can't make it work to any satisfaction to the people that are behind Trump. It's like foreign policy is lost right now.
That brings us back to, I remember now what Patrick Corbett's last thing was that escaped me. It came to me while you were talking, but it's related to what you were saying. And it's kind of what comes after. But it sounds, Carlo, like you lack an appreciation for what it means to be a stable genius. Stable geniuses do not have to put in the work, Carlo. They work from instinct. They just have insights. They just know. And you don't understand that, Carlo. So you just trust the plan. 6D
I'll
chess.
say intuition.
What's the plan for China?
Different can of worms, but I would say intuition works for Trump because the majority of people in our government at this point just aren't smart and also don't have intuition. Like intuition's very rare. Like even just being able to think, what do I want, rather than someone telling you what you want. I think we have a very large blob of people who just don't even have intuition. So Trump does have intuition, which is a huge asset for him. But I think Carlo described it pretty good. He's not particularly interested in educating himself about any particular subject. He's not particularly interested in finding someone who's knowledgeable about a particular subject. That is. I think in the early stages of a game, the intuition gets him ahead of everybody, but it starts working against him later when you actually get to steps that are more complicated. You do actually have to research something. And tariffs, which Carlo mentioned, are a good example of that, because there are ways the tariffs can be used to the benefit of the USA, especially if the first few 100 days of it has been doing it as a threat, and then the other person backs down and lifts his tariffs or whatever it is that Trump had wanted him to do. I mean, Canada did that, Mexico did that, but then he jumped into it with China, and but China is not Canada or Mexico, right? They basically told him to pound sand, and they have teeth to bite back, and they actually have the assets to get into a trade war. And I think that did catch some people by surprise. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
I mean, you think people expected China to capitulate?
Especially because they did. I know every step of the way the people who don't like Trump were spelling it out as a failure, but I think the more neutral people were able to observe that, yes, the tariffs did get Trump what he wanted, the first times he did, because he did bully Canada, he did bully Mexico, he bullied some other people, and it always worked, right? Because it's a bully, because, let's be honest, Trump is a bully. That is his mindset, and he threatens people, and he expects them to just do what he wants, and that worked. And I think the way China is portrayed in Washington politics, it was expected to roll over. And again, it's not just in China. If you remember our show from a couple of weeks ago, when Trump was furious, not just at Russia, but at Putin personally, because apparently he had, I guess, popped his balloon in the conversation. I don't know if we ever got an explanation for why Trump was so upset, but I think he got basically told to pound sand, because I think he probably approached the Ukraine issue the same way he approached China. He was just assuming he would make demands and the other side would do what he wanted. So, and I think if I had to speculate, he just got told that Russia is not going to just do what he wants. They want their demands met. And he got really upset and bent out of shape about it. So I think that's going to be a problem for him unless he can figure out a way to make his team. Of course, that requires listening to other people. So he does have a team. He does have a few individuals who could probably help him navigate these better. But he's going to have to be willing to listen to them and accept decisions made by them. It's going to be interesting to see if Trump's willing to do that. Hey, Carlo, it looks like he raised his hand. Let's see what he. Yeah, he's unmuted. You're unmuted, Carlo.
Elon Musk has taken care of that problem. He's let them all. He's fired all the people who have in-depth knowledge. I remember in my bookstore it was a kind of a habit of retired State Department people or CIA people to want to talk to you about what they did, and so I talked to a lot of them, and they would bring their papers in. They'd be they'd be marked what is that secure, but they would assure me that this wasn't the case anymore. They wrote that in the 70s. Wasn't the case anymore, but they were very proud of the work they did. I had one specific customer whose sole job was analyzing the Soviet Union, and he brought me these typed papers that he'd done, that he'd written with his name on them, and he knew a hell of a lot about the Soviet Union. Of course, you want to listen to somebody like that, and they're gone. Bye. Elon Musk, that idiot knows better, So it's a double whammy. Those people, a lot of those people are not there anymore, and it begins at the bottom. It begins at self-motivated people that they get into government who like what they do and do an entire lifetime, and have an intimate relationship with the facts and the history, and end up writing books. Somebody mentioned Carol Quigley's book on one of the talk shows the other day, Tragedy and Hope. I was so shocked because that book was so truthful about what was going on in what we've come to refer as the deep state, that the CIA burned as many copies as it could get. I haven't been able to buy a copy of that in 40 years. He's a professor at a local university here. Book runs about 800 pages. If you ever see a copy of Tragedy and Hope, buy it. It's rare now because of its concrete approach to things. A lot of these people, they're not delusional. They deal in the facts. They have the history, and that idiot Musk, along with his tool Trump, have gotten rid of them. For what reason? I'm not. I mean, they're using them as an excuse for reducing the deficit. And I'm getting a little off the mark here, but I haven't seen them go after the military yet. Musk and Trump have not gone after. They're going to provide another hike to the military, the first $1 trillion a year military that the world has ever known, or possibly since the Romans. So,
no, that's
well. I'll just. I mean, I agree to extent on criticism of Trump. I don't know if I would not go so far as to praise the people he fired. I mean, again, I need to remind everybody these CIA guys, these State Department guys, these DOD guys that Trump fired were the geniuses who brought us Afghanistan, who brought us Iraq, who brought us Georgia. I mean, 2008 Georgia. I mean, if we're going to talk about, yes, there are lots of guys who studied the Soviet Union and studied Russia, studied Slavic studies in college, got their master's degrees in it. But then they did Georgia. That was the assumption that they were going to. I know. Well, you're Carlo.
I disagree with that. They're not the decision makers. They're not the decision makers.
But they're the people who inform the decision makers.
Yeah, but the decision makers are the people that are the Rubios and the Heskeths whatever his name is, and that they're the people that make the decisions. And in this case, they can't even make decisions because they don't even have grounded information. And you suspect that maybe they wouldn't have it even if they had the proper information. But those people have been cut off. And the other thing is, listen, anyway, the way they did it, I know I mentioned Mitt Romney on one of the programs. And what I meant by that was, here was a guy who made his fortune by buying up distressed companies, being involved in groups that bought up distressed companies, and then they sold off the
vulture capitalism,
the assets, right? So that's what basically they're trying to do here. But that Musk and Trump are trying to do here. They already own the assets. They're just trying to get unload them and say, look, we've recouped all this money. Of course, they're lying. Let's get that out in the open. That's bullshit. They haven't done anything close to that. But by the same token, the way they've done it, fuck, I wouldn't dump a basket of rats out the back alley of the most expensive DC restaurant here in Washington.
You have a higher opinion
like
of
that.
the CIA than me.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said you have a higher opinion of the CIA than me. I mean, because I've spent, because the last several years I've read. I would say I've had the misfortune of reading quite a few of these Soviet studies papers produced by these people, not the decision makers, of course, but people in the Air Force, people in the Air Force intelligence, people in the DoD, people in the intelligence community, and 99% of it. I mean, once in a while you'll come across a true statement, but it's usually by accident. So no, I would completely disagree with the statement that's just bad decision makers. I think, like, if you look at, I mentioned Georgia, but I think in 2008, if you asked, before the Georgian shelling and invasion started, if you asked anybody in the CIA, anybody in the Pentagon, how's this going to go? Like, oh, well, Russia is completely unprepared. Georgians have this NATO equipment and NATO training. They'll just steamroll South Ossetia. It'll be a cakewalk. It'll be over in 3 days. And then they were wondering if the Russians were even going to stop. Or if they were just going to take all of Georgia, right? And there were a couple articles of journalists, like not even pro-Russian journalists, but just anti-Russian journalists who were in Georgia at the time, and they said that the NATO advisors were hiding in the hotel, in the 5-star hotel that the journalists were at, because they were worried they were scared the Russian army was going to kill them, right? Those are the guys. Those are the guys who were saying, who inform our decision makers. I would be happy. So I do agree with you. I'd be happier if Trump had hired someone besides Elon Musk. And if it didn't just look like a homeless guy ripping copper wire out of a house, right? Just stripping all the copper wire out. That's kind of what it looks like, just not really putting any thought into it. But at the same time, it's such a trash system. I don't think U.S. national interests or even national security is going to suffer from firing these people.
Well, I still disagree to a large extent, because when I was doing the community access TV show I did back in the 80s or 70s, it's the only reason it got the hearing it got is I was doing it in Washington, D.C. Obviously, if I was doing it in Des Moines, nobody would have been interested. But there's also a lot of alternative magazines that had or have bureaus in this area. And the way we did the program was to buy their publications or have them send a copy for free. And we would read verbatim the information that they gathered. Covert Action Information Bulletin. We just talked about Lou Wolf's publication last week or 2 weeks ago, and all that. And what we would find is that a lot of this information originated with the people that Ian just put down. That's where it came from. That's what that was Izzy Stone's big argument. Izzy Stone said, "Look, they go. How do you get all this information? Well, I just read the government journals. I just read what the government puts out." That's literally what he said. And Izzy used to come down. He would take his afternoon walk in front of the DC Public University, and a friend of mine ran into him, and they used to have coffee together. And that he reiterated that any number of times. That's how he got the scoop. He got the scoop from government information, from those flacks that worked their entire lives. So maybe that's not true anymore.
Well,
hasn't been for a while. I don't know.
That was nice. I mean, I hate to say it, Carlo, but Izzy Stone was a while ago. Let's just say a while ago. 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. I mean,
He wrote the hidden history of the Korean War.
My point
is a master.
I think it is true that the American national security apparatus was a different beast in the 1970s, 1980s than it is now. Because, and I would say it's actually true. They had a better picture of the Soviet Union than our current deep state, if you will, has of Russia. Right? So they had an understanding of what the Soviet armed forces were like, of what the Soviet planned economy was like. They said, here's weapons, they recognize the missile gap, they recognize the advantages in tanks and IFVs that Soviet Union had to say, okay, we need to develop our own. They developed the Bradley, they developed the Abrams, they started developing the Javelin, all that is, and I would go so far as to say what we have now is just inertia from that generation of bureaucrats. Really, if we think about what Wunderwaffen, what big game-changing doctrines or weapons has the USA fielded since the early 1990s. I mean, you had Desert Storm in 1991, where you debuted the Patriot missile system, and the Patriot missile system was accused even right out the door of being a lemon of the Army, the Pentagon exaggerating its capability. And what have we? Maybe ask everybody, what have we produced since then?
You can't take the military-industrial complex that produces this weaponry and conflate it with the people that are writing the information. You can't conflate the facts as they lay them out and the conclusions that are drawn from the facts. Many times they're ignored. They just go on. They want the money. That's the money plan. That's the revolving door of the way the brass enriches themselves. The way high-level people at the CIA enrich themselves. I can come to Washington. I'll take you to their gated houses. I'll take you down to Georgetown. We can go to George. We can knock on general stores that have butlers.
Let me ask you this. Let me just leave you with one question. Okay, so not the military industrial complex. That's fine. Off the table. So what has any? Okay, let me ask you. Name one thing, one statement, one paper. What has the intelligence community or the State Department produced in the last? What statement have they made or prediction have they made in the last 30 years has proven to be correct about China, about Russia, about anybody?
That's a fair question, and I don't have a strong opinion on the disagreement. I'm enjoying the disagreement. I'm a little partial to Ian's perspective. Like, I don't think we lost a whole bunch of talent in these recent cuts. The recent government cuts that Doge is doing when he laid off some of the NED, right? NED and the other one, a USAID. So, and maybe some State Department cuts. I don't think we lost a bunch of talent and now we're going to suffer because of it. I don't really see things like that. I want to get Patrick's take on the disagreement, see if he has an opinion. And then I do want to refocus us back on Iran and Ukraine. But Patrick, any you want to weigh in on the disagreement we've been enjoying?
Well, I am enjoying it. That's for sure. Because it does, the sparks fly off and you get some light on things, and so I'm definitely thinking it over. But I'm tending towards Ian in the sense that I think structurally or internally within the departments, people who were producing good work and actionable advice were being sidelined. They weren't being thrown out. They were just thanks for your paper. So, and I think things have changed, and there's nothing happening now that is really catching people's attention of a way to look at things, a way forward for the United States. They refuse to look at an American role in a multipolar world. So if they've taken that off the table, what have people got to work on?
Well, that kind of does bring us back to the big topics at hand and the huge divergence between how could a peace agreement be attainable either in Iran or in Ukraine when the two sides are so far apart. But Patrick's original question was, let's say they were able to Trump is able to find a way to end Biden's war, as he calls it, and have some kind of a peace agreement with Ukraine. And let's just assume that peace agreement is pretty much conceding to everything that Putin is saying he needs, because that's ultimately the only way they're going to come to a peace agreement. It's going to be comprehensive. It's gonna involve things that Russia has been stating for a long time needs to happen.
And just look at the list of things that the United States has either been the motivator of or somehow involved in breaking promises that were made, and they're on the public record. I mean, what they said about that NATO will move not 1 inch further towards Russia. It's like, there's so many things, and I find myself sometimes when I read the translations of Putin's statements, I think, isn't he paying attention to what's happened before? Like as particularly grates on me when he talks about getting together with our partners, i.e. the United States. And I think, okay, maybe that's a different interpretation from the Russian. But if you think of those people as your partners, then you're going to set yourself up for a serious.
And that's the point. Is the United States trying to solve? Is Trump trying to solve the Ukraine issue because there's been a sea change in the West, and they have agreed that they're no longer going to pursue global hegemony, and they're going to, resign themselves to cooperation and multipolarity.
Well, then their actions and attitude towards China don't square with that.
Right. And so that speaks directly to what comes after. And so even if Trump is trying to, get a peace in Ukraine, it's only a tactic, in the overall strategy, which hasn't changed, of maintaining Western global hegemony throughout the rest of the 21st century. I mean, until that is the fundamental problem, that the United States is just not willing to accept a multipolarity and, China's rise and, a strong Russia, a strong Iran in the West Asia region. So, until there's that acceptance of new realities, it doesn't even really matter, if what kind of an agreement, how sincere Trump is in pursuing a peace in Ukraine or a peace in Iran, because these are just tactics towards the ultimate strategy that hasn't changed. And that's the problem.
And
But,
if you go back and use as an example, for instance, the talks with Israel on a two-state state. I'm going to stumble over the word.
Tactics, exactly. Tactics.
It's the same tactic. They said,
yeah.
"Oh, we offered them this, they offered that, they turned it down." I hear that the echo of that coming out from Trump as well, saying, I'm working as hard as I can to get peace. I offered them everything they wanted, and they're turning it down. And that. So you blame the victim, and it's just a real old story from the Western camp.
Does that sound correct, Ian?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we look at America First, I have seen a bunch of text, their own statements, both internally and external audiences. About what America First policy is, and it's not multipolarity. I don't think they even use that word. It's not like we're going to be one big happy family with the other poles of the world. And I'm paraphrasing, but this is a direct statement they made. America First is about ending the policy of deferring to a collective interest, and by collective I assume they mean the globalists, the EU and Britain, Commonwealth countries, and the USA is this big globalist entity, and they just want what is good for the interests of the USA, right? So it doesn't mean they're going to be multipolar, or USA is going to be this cuddly teddy bear that respects the other. No, quite the opposite. It could actually mean a more belligerent USA. But what it does mean is that the USA is not going to defer to European interests, not going to defer to British interests. They're not going to fund all these different groups all over the world because it suits this collective entity. That's all it means. And as far as, and I want to bring up, the Trump statement that he would end the war in one day with one phone call. That's Trump being Trump, right? He hyperbole is like his thing, and he doesn't really think before he speaks either. But it is in principle true, because Ukraine is 100% dependent on the USA. Yes, Europe is giving a lot. But the ISR, the intelligence, just all of those flights, all of those planes and satellites, everything that the USA contributes can't be replaced. There's no one who can come even close to replacing it. And I think we can see just how one-sided that relationship is by when Zelensky came and got into that confrontation with Vance and Trump. And then Trump said, okay, I'm flipping the switch. No intelligence for targeting or for operations. No money, no nothing. I've seen, we can only speculate. We can't know for sure how long Ukraine would last if they were completely cut off or partially cut off. But we can see how urgent that situation. I think it was even 2 days before Zelensky came crawling back, said, okay, we'll give you what you want. So that said, it's true what Billy Bob said. If Trump wanted to, he could end the war in a day by just giving Russia everything they want. But Trump is not pro-Russia. Even in Russia, he's not. No one in Russia thinks Trump is pro-Russia, right? So what he's doing is, okay, he knows he has all this leverage over Ukraine, and he to an extent, his leverage against Russia because he's using Ukraine against them. So he's trying to get the sweetest. So I think it's actually, at this point, ridiculous to say Trump is showing favoritism towards Russia, because what Trump is trying to do is to get the sweetest deal he can, not just with Ukraine, but probably with other global, irons in the fire that the USA has. And he's trying to get the sweetest deal possible. And that's why it's taking so long. I will say there is a risk of Biden's war, as the title suggests, becoming Trump's war. I think if it drags into, and I will give a hard date, right? If it drags into the winter of this year, right, where Ukraine's energy infrastructure is under threat, where heating homes is a problem, where keeping the wheels turning in Ukraine is like this existential crisis. That's when it's going to become Trump's war rather than Biden's war. And that's something that happened to Nixon, by the way. Nixon was like, "Oh, I'll end Johnson's war. And then Johnson's war became Nixon's war." And I could say the same thing might happen.
And I promised Patrick I would give him a 1 hour notice, because I think he might have a hard stop at 10.
I do. I've got a couple of minutes leeway, but I just want to end with one thing. If anybody thinks that the Doge operation with Elon Musk has anything to do with taking money and resources away from countries that is being given by the U.S., and thus, it's a cost to them, they're mistaken, because those programs are all meant to enhance the U.S. hegemony. Stumbling on words, but anyway, that it's not in the interests of Ukraine to give them money for weapons. That's only in the interests of the U.S., because likely Ukraine won't survive gifts like that. Anyway, I do got to go. This has been a very lively one. I'm sorry I have to go today, but anyway, I'll check in and catch the rest of it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Patrick. I can remove you from the stage, but we appreciated your being our special guest, and we will have you back soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, I see Carlo had his hand up. He's been waiting patiently. I have unmuted Carlo.
I just want to say, look, dozens of books have been written about the activities of the State Department, the CIA, and you can read in these popular books, most of which have to go through a vetting process with the U.S. government, through the CIA, through the State Department, how there's contentious views on these subjects. The fact that Afghanistan was a lost cause, that wasn't just because everyone was in lockstep. Let's go into Afghanistan. That wasn't the case. There was a lot of people that didn't want to go into Afghanistan. And I'm sure that was, they had to kill the president of the United States to get into Vietnam in the way they wanted to get into it. So this is not any apologia for the CIA, what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you don't let people, you have to talk to the people before you let them go. You have to have cause for firing people like that. And this generalized notion that you can just bring out the hose and sweep the decks and wash everybody out of their offices is crazy nonsense. Crazy nonsense. They try to operate that way. It's not going to work. At any level. And that's what's going on now. That's what's going on now.
I want to reiterate what Patrick was saying regarding these Doge cuts are not going to negatively impact the core hegemonic interests of the United States. Like whatever they are cutting isn't going to, again, they're not cutting the military industrial complex. They're increasing the military industrial complex. And, okay, so like our viewer here, Graz Sarducci, says that, Berletic looks out his window in Bangkok and he can see all the USAID subversives, doing business as usual. So, it's hardly a surprise. I think what Doge is going to be doing, it's going to be, probably cutting like the Veterans Administration, cutting service to veterans, cutting, food stamp programs and, welfare programs and things like that. They're going to do things that are going to harm the poorest and most vulnerable, and they're not going to touch the tools of empire that they're going to need even more going forward as this security competition with China and Russia really escalates.
Well, and I want to add here also. I want to add that
we're going to get
it's
Carlo
also
next,
it's a loyalty thing as well, right? Because it is whether we paint it as a hegemony agreeing with Trump, or at least part of the hegemony wanting Trump. It is a pivot. And part of what screwed Trump, besides himself, I mean, he does like to shoot himself in the foot, but part of it was that he stepped into the White House in 2017, in January 20th, 2017, and the whole apparatus was working against him, because he was, even back then, you say America first, and all these guys are like, no, we have to think about the European Union, we have to think about we have to think about British interests, we have to think about all this other stuff, and they were working against him. Well, it's just like, it's no different than a hostile takeover of a corporation, right? What is the first thing you do if you do a hostile takeover, or even not even a hostile takeover, if you just buy a company, the first thing you do is you look at everybody and you're like, okay, you know what, I'm going to fire these people. It's not even a question of if they're qualified. Being qualified,
the new management is going to have their own agenda, their own strategy, their own ideas of what needs to take place going forward, and they're going to form the corporation in that image.
And if he's saying we don't give a shit. So if Trump, it absolutely, I mean, if you can just I know it's tough for some people, but if we just put our emotions aside for a minute, if Trump is not necessarily anti-NATO, but he's just like, I don't give a fuck about NATO, I don't give a fuck about the EU. Well, that does mean you need to fire the people who are, because let's be honest, the government is full of people who are passionately in love with NATO, in love with the EU, and you have to fire them. You just have to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, let's hear Carlo's response. Oh, here, go ahead. Unmute him. Ian,
I try. I think we both tried to unmute him at the same time.
That's apples and oranges. Who the fuck knows that? If you don't sit down with somebody, if you haven't spent a long time with somebody, you don't know their intent or their passion or the quality of their work. You have to see what it's done. The other thing is, there is a difference between a hostile buyout and the way the government operates. First of all, you have these people. Sure, you'd get rid of them, but Romney would point out, look, the company was bankrupt. I bought it for pennies on the dollar because these people couldn't do the job. Now we're going to get people in to do the job, whether that was true or not. And in most cases, it was lies. They just dismantled the company and sold off the pieces. Now, that's a wholly different set of circumstances, right? Than what Ian is trying to talk about. The comparison he's trying to make. It's not a valid comparison. I mean,
I'm sorry, Carlo, listen to me. Okay, look, I've dealt with these people, right? Okay. And even after I had nothing to do with the USA, I mean, I've had these people, right? People in the, in various jobs, like, and I knew they were am involved with the U.S. government somehow. I repeatedly, like when I started speaking out about Ukraine and all this stuff, right? I'd have these people come on my pages like, oh, well, I'm reporting. Like I know like at least 4 or 5 of these little fuckers went to their bosses like, oh, there's this American citizen, he's committing treason. We have to get him. We have to take away his pension. We have to put criminal charges on him. I know, so when these people get fired, well, I say good. Fuck them. They were not doing anything useful. They were not doing anything good for the USA. All they cared about is their little stupid New World Order, like Bush said, it's a world order. I don't
That's
care
a blanket thing. That's a blanket thing.
So some CIA agents are good.
I mean, what that tells me is the obvious. They're being fired not for the reason you're presenting or the fact that it makes you feel good. They're being fired for some entirely other reason that's not being talked about and not being discussed. And that's enriching the richest people on the planet. That's what this whole thing seems to be about.
I mean, why do our taxes need? I mean, whether you're rich or poor, why do your taxes need to fund a CIA disinformation campaign in Pakistan or India or Taiwan or wherever? Why does your money need?
Well, because listen, I know you can poo-poo this if you want, but there's a lot of people closing down their businesses here in Washington. People that supplied lunches, the people that work for the government that no longer have jobs, people that used to do the plumbing in their houses when their plumbing broke down, people that used to rent the apartments. They're losing these people lose their jobs. They leave the city. They no longer rent. That's happening all over the city. DC's in recession. I'm sorry. You think it's already in recession.
I don't want someone to lose his plumbing business, but that should be proof that, and just to be clear here, I'm not a libertarian. I believe in health, in universal health care. I believe in, you could even convince me to support universal things like universal basic income. But why do we need, hundreds of thousands of people whose their only job is to ruin the rest of the world? So, I'm sorry someone lost his plumbing business, but
you guys are talking past each other to a great extent. I mean, you're making different points and you're really, you're projecting arguments onto the other that they're not really making. And I think there's validity in both your perspectives. I did want to maybe pivot to I saw this two great clips. Jeffrey Sachs was at this big thing in Turkey. It's like a big diplomatic conference. What was it called? Anatolia something, a diplomatic conference. And there was all these Turkish oligarchs, basically Western aligned, important people, diplomats, media editors, probably a lot of millionaires in the audience. And they were all just talking about how, we really need to start helping out Syria. We've got rid of the monster Assad. And so the West really needs to come together. Investors need to come together. We really need to start helping Syria. And Jeffrey Sachs, to his credit, kind of put his foot down and said, "You motherfuckers, shut the fuck up." Not exactly like that, but he explained quite clearly that all this, everybody's speech, everybody's talking point about Assad being evil, and now that we've gotten rid of Assad, we've got a chance. We've got a chance at success for the Syrians. Think about the Syrians, and of course the Syrians are gonna get fucked. Like nobody gives a fuck about the Syrians. But Sachs really kind of spoke truth to power. I'm sure nobody was very happy with him, even though they know that he was telling the truth about it. And at the same conference, Lavrov was on a one-on-one with an interviewer, and he just had some great commentary on how NATO was, being duplicitous and was really the problem with the Ukraine. Anyway, those were a couple great things I would encourage people to view on YouTube, the Jeffrey Sachs clips. at that conference, and then also the Lavrov interview. I'm sorry. Yes. So I brought that up, and I kept you guys from your disagreement, which I'm sure we could have continued for another a half hour or so.
Well, I just have a few minutes left. I need to go to the store before it closes. I have to pick up a package. But do you want to hit Iran before we sign off? What do you have? Do you have any thoughts on Iran?
I do. I mean, it's kind of it seems like the West. Yeah, Carl, I'm gonna give you. Let me give you 1 second. So it seems like the West has lowered its demand. It seems like Trump is making concessions. Some of the things that are coming out are causing headlines to appear. Suggesting that Trump is softening his stance. And so, I would like to think that we don't have to bomb Iran, because that would be catastrophic. It would send the world into a tailspin. And I'm torn, because I'm thinking that is the ultimate plan, because that's what, the establishment consensus understands needs to happen. And then there's the people saying, like Trump, like, I don't want to be responsible for sending the planet into a global economic tailspin. And so it's just hard to imagine that he would push the button on that and subject himself to so much hatred and disgust by all the people who are going to be harmed tremendously from that behavior. The only way he could manage to do that is if he could totally and convincingly blame somebody else, but he can't. Nobody's going to believe him if he tries to blame Iran for the U.S. bombing them like that. That's just, so maybe Israel's going to bomb Iran. I mean, so there's a lot of thoughts, but definitely the U.S. seems to be softening its stance, lowering its demands. What that actually means, of course, remains to be seen. So, Carlo, I'm going to unmute you.
I've got to go back to Ukraine just for one other thing. Yeah. Then I'll briefly talk about Iran. Ian said he was happy that a bunch of people who had gotten us into foreign wars around the world had been summarily fired. Yet we had a comment from a young woman below, I believe it was a woman, who pointed out that in Thailand, Berletic is freaking out. It's true, because the USAID hasn't blinked a bit. Hasn't lost. Well, that completely counters what Ian is saying right in the face of it. It's going to go on. Yeah, you just may have gotten a lot of the wrong people, or a lot of the people who weren't. If you brought them into your office, you probably would decide to keep them on, because they were for invading Afghanistan. They were for bombing Serbia. Blah, blah, blah. Let's not get into that. Okay, Iran. I've been watching the talking heads the last few days, and they've done a sea change. The talking heads we respect, or I at least have some confidence in, and they've done a sea change. There will be no war with Iran, is what they're saying now. And the reason they're saying it seems to hinge on what this guy, Pete Vitkoff, brought back with him from his talk in, where were they, Oman?
Oman, yeah. Which is not Amman. So I was corrected. So there's Amman, Jordan is the capital of Jordan, Amman, and then Oman is a country. So they're meeting in the capital of Oman. And they're going to meet in Rome next Saturday. So they scheduled to reconvene in a week in Italy. So I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, it would be great to avoid war, to get some kind of an agreement that Iran can accept. And Iran is in a strong position. They don't need to surrender. They don't need to concede. They don't need to make concessions. They would like to have some of the sanctions lifted, but I trust the leadership of Iran not to agree to a bad deal. Like, if Iran agrees to the deal, I'm going to be confident that it's in the best interest of Iran and the region. But can that happen is still a huge question mark.
Yeah.
So as far as Iran goes, it's funny. It's not funny, but it's ironic, because Trump 1.0, right? The first edition of Trump, said, this is a bad deal. We have a bad deal with Iran. So he unilaterally yanked the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
Right. And what's interesting, so that's on Trump, right? 100% on Trump. But the but here is that Biden came in, the Biden team came in, and Iran said, "Hey, we're still interested in the deal." And it's, my memory is a little foggy, but as far as I know, they didn't really even put any additional demands, right? They didn't try to blackmail Biden, as far as I know. They didn't say, we want an extra cushy deal. They just said, they basically just said, just reinstate the deal on our original terms, and we'll accept it. But Biden, or at least the people on Biden's team, did not want to look soft on Iran. So they said no, which is, and that's what makes it a bipartisan failure, because you can't at that point, you cannot blame it all on Trump and on Republicans, because Democrats also doubled down. They didn't just accept it. They actually doubled down and said, no, fuck Iran, basically. And now it's kind of strange that you have Trump, who is the guy who pulled the plug on the Iran deal, now in this predicament of, we need an Iran deal. So that's why I say it's ironic. But I remember arguing with you about this in our, I think it was our last Tuesday meeting. I was very skeptical about war with Iran, and the main reason I said why is because under Biden, completely different management, the pushback, I suspected the pushback against the war with Iran, or escalating with Iran, was coming from the Pentagon. It was our own military guys saying, I don't think it's a good idea. It's just physically, materially not a good idea. They're not, of course, using moral arguments. They're just saying it's just not a good idea. So that's why I said, because it's mostly those same guys, right? I mean, some guys in the Pentagon got fired, but it's mostly, I assume it's mostly the same talking point. It's the same stance, right? It's not really different under Trump. And they're saying it's still a bad idea. I think the movement, because, I know Scott Ritter was saying, oh, there's all this movement of B-52s and whatnot. I think it's posturing, right? Because there is posturing. Yeah. Iranians see it. Russia sees it. They see, oh, crap, he's putting all this military, pent up military pressure close to us, so it's kind of, it's bullying, right? But at the end of the day, I think it's probably a bluff. I said this. I've said this several times before. I'd be very surprised if they escalate.
So you're standing by your position.
Mm-hmm.
No, and again, I hope you're right. It's looking more like you may be right with the recent headlines. Yeah, Israel is the wild card. So somebody, Zatunya, did say Israel's the wild card. Ultimately, though, I can't imagine Israel defying Trump. If Trump agrees to a deal with Iran and Israel doesn't like it and they defy Trump and they bomb Iran, I think if Israel ends up bombing Iran after Trump says he's got a deal in place, I think that's going to be with a wink, wink, nod, nod from Trump. It's like, go ahead and bomb them. But
the problem is Israel too has a lot to lose, and we've talked about it on this show too. Yeah,
But look, Ian, it seems obvious that Netanyahu for decades has wanted the United States to attack Iran, even though they have stuff to lose. They've really wanted the United States to attack Iran. And so I think they believe that it'll be in Israel's best interest, that they'll be in danger, they're going to be harmed, but they're going to ultimately get rid of this problem once and for all. And so,
well, think of it this way. So Iran. So the main thing is not just that Iran. That's kind of my fault. I said that wrong. So Israel does have a lot. Of course, they have a lot to lose because they're a country in the Middle East. They're within missile range. But what the main thing is, if the USA and its Arab allies, because let's be honest, basically almost every Arab state in the Middle East, almost every Arab state is an ally of Israel. If they all come together to defend Israel, and the biggest way they could defend Israel is the airspace. If the USA and those Arabs all come together to defend Israel, that doesn't completely negate, but it greatly reduces Iran's ability to retaliate against attacks on their soil. But the problem is that if Trump makes a deal and Israel unilaterally attacks, then it's just Israel. So I think there are limits.
They would do that with the express intent to draw the United States into
right. But so I do think the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby, the Jewish lobby, if you will, it has a lot of pull. But I don't think they're like, I don't think like those guys on, the Stormfront forums that, Israel controls literally like mind controls people in the USA. I think there's limits to what that lobby can do.
Yeah. And again, they don't want to piss Trump off, and that's why I don't think they would try and unilaterally destroy a Trump agreement with Iran unless Trump wanted them to do that, just so he didn't have to take the blame himself.
Right. But and the problem is that the USA also has a lot to it, because the problem is we do still have troops in the Middle East.
I mean, does anybody really care about, like, a lot of people would want to see U.S. troops dead just because that would increase the chance that we're going to destroy Iran, totally.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because right now it's kind of a skeleton crew there. It's not a robust presence. I think there's probably, the very figures vulnerable. I've seen, it's not a presence that's robust against an aggressive attack. So if Iran wanted to hit them, they could. It would be a mess. So I would be extremely, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would be extremely surprised if the USA escalated with Iran. I think. And also the fact is, it's one of those things too. I think Iran could develop nuclear weapon. It looks like Carlo, I see you gesturing. I'll give it to you in a second. But I think Iran's they could develop. I don't think they could. They've been complaining about Iran being on the cusp of developing nukes for 20 years. I think it's true. They could. They just haven't.
Yeah.
And they're using it as a bartering, because not developing nukes is itself a bartering chip. Because once you cross that once you cross the nuclear threshold, you in a sense become invincible, but you also become a pariah state, right? Because North Korea right now, it's literally impossible to attack North Korea because they're a nuclear power, but they're also a pariah state, and they will remain a pariah state until something radically changes in the world order. So I think Iran recognizes that. So like, oh, we're on the, they hype that up. We're on the edge. We could develop nukes whenever we want, but they use that as a bargaining chip. We don't have to develop nukes. If you give us something, if you give us our frozen funds, if you give us concessions, we'll choose to not develop nukes. I think that's a deliberate and smart policy on their part. So Carlo.
I was just going to say that a number of the people that I've been watching and listening to claim that Iran could beat the United States, not beat Israel, but beat the United States in open warfare. The other thing I would mention is, you talk about nuclear weapons being deterrent to something much worse. What about the situation with Pakistan and India, which has seen any number of skirmishes? What about the situation with India and China, which currently has skirmishes going on in the Northeast? That hasn't led to nuclear war. What's really the cap on nuclear war is the stance, the genocidal, unbelievable stance that the United States and Israel have taken toward Gaza, for example. Just beneath the surface of what Israel is all about is like a genocide of the entire region. That's a kind of abomination that speaks to nuclear war, and evidently it does not when you have skirmishes in Kashmir, for example, or the skirmishes between India and Pakistan. I just wanted to throw that out. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't care if Iran got nuclear weapons. It doesn't necessarily signal that there's going to be a nuclear war. It means that there's now a deterrent, and it could, increase peace, actually. But ultimately, I trust, the Iranian leadership to, make its own decisions about what its best interest is. I totally have faith in their wisdom to determine their own best interest. And they're in a strong position, and they know they're in a strong position. So they don't need to concede and surrender to Trump's demands and, throw the Palestinians. That's really what Trump wants, right? He wants them to become a subordinate to the West in the region. He wants Israel to be the regional hegemon, and he wants greater Israel. So he wants, the Palestinian issue to be resolved by, eradicating the Palestinians and Israeli colonization, and then a new world order where everybody's happy. The Arab despots, it's the capitalists, it's the rich oligarchs just dominating the place without, and concerned with making money and profit, at the expense of the people that live in the region. So I'm happy with, the axis of resistance, I think, is still strong. I think, we'll see what they're going to try and do with Gaza. I know they want Iran to stand down and allow them to colonize Gaza, colonize the West Bank, expel the Palestinians, send them to some other country. Iran's not going to do that. Yemen is not going to allow that. And so, it remains to be seen how that's going to pan out. How do you guys are now, Ian? I don't, that's a big can of worms. I don't want to, if you need to get going and,
yeah, I should wrap it up here. It's 8:30. But yeah, I don't actually have any closing thoughts besides what I said already, except I think we'll get a deal with Iran. And we also have to think of, definitely can't nuke Iran, because there's it's not a thing that can be done. And Iran can hit American assets in the region. So it's just, I'm not terribly worried about it. So that's my closing thought.
Okay. Carlo, any last thoughts?
Yeah, just briefly, what did not appear in the first agreement. If that makes it, at least, I can't remember what it is. I can't remember who talked about it. I'm sorry. But if that reappears in this new agreement, then I think, yes, Ian's right. There will be an agreement. It seemed like a deal maker to me. And I just wanted to add one other thing about Leo brought up documentary filmmaker, as he called Werner Herzog. But I just wanted to point out that Herzog is also a feature filmmaker. He's made some great films: Aguirre, Wrath of God, Strutzek, When the Green Ants Dream, Fitzcarraldo. Just a brilliant filmmaker. I highly recommend him. So.
Okay, thank you for acculturating our audience. I myself am very uncultured. A lot to learn and appreciate about art. But yeah, we talked about that producer last week. So, but yeah, let us wrap up. We will reconvene hopefully on Friday. I want to thank Patrick Corbett for our special guest, and as always, Ian and Carlo. We will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.